From our studios in Olympia, Washington, TCTV presents South Sound Seniors, news and views featuring the people, places, and events that impact our growing senior community here in the South Sound region. Our program is presented as a community service to inform and involve you and yours in the lives of older adults. Your host for South Sound Seniors is the Executive Director of Senior Services for South Sound, Eileen Mackenzie Sullivan.
Welcome to South Sound Seniors, a program for and about older adults in our community. We have a great show for you tonight, some really good information for many people. We're going to talk to a CPA, but first I have to give a shout out to the Senior Action Network, because SAN, Senior Action Network, is really what we're going to be talking about right now. They bring our guests to us every other month, and Gary Merz is one of those Senior Action Network members, and I'm so happy to welcome him. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you.
It's really nice. Now, how long have you been a part of SAN?
I've been a part of SAN for 3 years.
All right. Well, I'm so glad, because I know you bring an expertise and an understanding about taxes and working with seniors and that kind of thing that otherwise, you know, it's hard to find sometimes. So thanks for being here, and thanks for being part of SAN.
It's a pleasure.
Okay, so we're going to start a little bit about, I've got some questions here because, you know, I'm not really a financial genius myself, so I just want you to know you're going to be teaching me as you teach our viewing audience, okay?
Okay.
And any dumb looks that I'm giving, it is not acting. They're really dumb looks on my part. Okay. So, how much income can an individual make in 2013 and still have to file an income tax return? Now we're talking about seniors.
Right.
Right? Yes.
So if someone is single, the amount is $10,000, and if they're under age 65, so it's $10,000, and it's a function of a combination of your personal exemption. Mm-hmm. So if a single person would have one personal exemption, and what their standard deduction would be. Now, if you're 65, you get a larger standard deduction, so it goes up from there. Okay. So if you're over 65 for 2013, you could make up to $11,500, another $1,500, and still not even have to file a tax return.
Okay.
And then for married couples, it's $20,000 if you're under 65, and it can go all the way up to $22,400, I believe, mm-hmm. if they're both over 65. Mm-hmm. So you're kind of in that 10,000 to 22,000 range, uh-huh. depending on what your age is and what your filing status is. And what we're talking about here is income, and income is very specific in the Internal Revenue Code. It can be interest, dividends. Mm-hmm. It can be wages earned, it could be rents, or if you have a small business, that would be considered mm-hmm. income as well. Mm-hmm. Also from any kind of a transaction from the sale of stocks or bonds, mm-hmm. As well as sale of real estate. So those are all that's kind of the generic definition of income. But a lot of times people will think that if they inherited property or they were gifted property, that's income, but it's not. It's not considered income.
Okay.
So if you don't have that much income, you don't even need to file a return.
Right.
So that's just good to know.
But when in doubt, ask.
Yes,
yeah.
Definitely.
Definitely, okay. So what are the circumstances that a taxpayer should file a return, even if their income is below what we just talked about?
Well, yeah, you can have situations where someone has worked, let's say, and they have a W-2 form, mm-hmm. but they didn't have enough money to where they needed to file, but they had withholding. So their employer took taxes out. So if they just filed a return, they could get their refund. Uh-huh. So in that case, it makes a lot of sense to file even though you don't have to, you might as well get your money. It's yours.
Get your money back, yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to leave chips on the table, so to speak.
Right.
And the other situation can be if you had retirement income mm-hmm. and that's the IRS requires the retirement distributions to those companies or the institutions to issue what are called 1099-Rs.
Right.
And those a lot of times will have withholding on them as well.
Okay. I always think of pirates. They're 1099.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
The thing that makes it a little bit complicated is Social Security income, because the amount may or may not be taxable, and if it is taxable, it could be taxable up to 85%. So if someone, and so a lot of times seniors have Social Security income, and they may be over the amount of say 10,000 or 20,000 or whatever, but they're not really sure how much of their Social Security is taxable. So there's some worksheets available. You can go to the IRS website, which is irs.gov, to find out. They have different things, really good tools on that website to determine whether you need to file or not.
Great.
So if you're still unsure, you can always just go to the IRS. You could even call our offices if they wanted to, and we could help them with that.
Okay.
There are other situations where someone would want to file a tax return even though they aren't at those income levels as well. One of them is where they have what are called refundable credits. One of them is the one that's been around for quite some time, is called the Earned Income Credit. And the Earned Income Credit is available to people. It used to be that in order to have Earned Income Credit, you had to have kids, like dependents.
Okay.
But that's no longer the case. The key is on an Earned Income Credit is that you have earned income. So that would be like business income, some type of earnings,
Right.
or a W-2,
Right.
not retirement income or dividends or interest. But if you actually worked, even though the amount is lower than that, even though you didn't have any withholding,
Right.
you could qualify for this Earned Income Credit. And that, again, it'd be worth it to file a return because you
sure.
actually get a refund even though you didn't pay any taxes, didn't have any withheld.
Oh, wow.
So there, again, and it
Makes
can
it
amount to
complicated.
quite a
Right.
bit. There's certain situations where someone might make, say, $8,000 to $10,000 on a W-2, let's say with a part-time job, and they actually would qualify for the Earned Income Credit as well as maybe getting any tax if there was any withholding.
Right. Boy, I bet every year there's money left on the table.
Definitely
when people
is.
don't claim that and don't file.
There's a relatively new credit that's also a refundable credit, and that is called the American Opportunity Credit, and that is for taxpayers who either themselves or their spouse or a dependent have paid college tuition,
Oh,
and that they're
goodness.
in a regular degree program. I mean, they don't have to be getting a degree, but if they're in a community college or a four-year university, then if they pay tuition, whoever claims that person on their tax return can get one of these refundable credits. And it's can be quite substantial. There's two parts of that credit. Part of it's refundable, part of it isn't. But if someone doesn't have any other income, they're probably going to at least get the refundable part of that.
Right.
And so that one, again, I've seen, where people will miss. They'll leave
Right.
basically dollars on the table where
Right.
they could, if they filed, they would get that.
Wow. Wow. So I'm going to take a break from my questions for just a second and just say, how did you learn all this stuff? Where did you get your background, Gary? Tell me about you.
Well, I went to college at Central Washington University in Ellensburg. And then right after that, I got my CPA license and started doing taxes right here in Olympia. And from there, I took a master's program from Golden Gate University. So I have a master's degree in taxation.
Wow. And your business is Bud Bay CPA?
Correct.
Which has a nice rhyme to it. I
Yes.
like that. Yeah. Okay. And how did you get involved in the Senior Action Network?
Well, I have a friend, Bruce Bamford, who has Bamford Financial Services, and he, just through acquaintances, he encouraged me to join Senior Action Network, and I've really enjoyed
And to
being
me,
a
that's
member
like
of it.
the stamp of approval. If Bruce Bamford says
Yes,
you're a good
that's
guy,
right.
you are a good
Yeah.
guy. Yeah. All right. So thank you. So here we go. I got to go back to my questions
Okay.
here. So I love that you sent me these, and I am learning so much. So if a taxpayer senior is unsure as to filing, and it is simple, where can that person get help?
There's lots of resources. One of them, like I mentioned before, is the IRS website, irs.gov. And even if you don't have a computer, you can still go to the library and they can help you with that. And you
They
can
can
find,
even come to the senior center and
Yeah,
get help there.
right.
Yes.
So that's the best resource right there. But another way to do it is to actually go to the IRS office. There's a 7th Avenue building. It's called the 7th Avenue building. The address is 319 7th Avenue Southeast in downtown Olympia, right next to the parking lot where the old the personnel Washington State building is, the old Sears and Roebuck building. And anyway, they are really helpful. They have a walk-in service where people can just come in and get a number. And they have some really competent people in there. And they'll actually prepare your if you need your return done and you make less than $51,000 of income, they'll prepare your return for you.
Wow, that's a pretty special service.
Yeah. And in addition to that, there's a program called Volunteer Income Tax Assistance, which and one of them is at the Olympia Senior Center. They have that every year.
Yep.
And so volunteers get trained, and then they can do the same thing that the IRS does. So you can just go in there. If you just check around, you'll see when the hours that they're posted in the different areas. It's not just the Olympia Senior Center. There's 3 or 4 of them around town.
Yep.
And I actually was involved with that program. I used to be a professor at different community colleges, and one that I worked at, I actually ran the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program at the one in Kirkland at Lake Washington Technical College. And in general, you get really good service if it's a fairly simple return. And again, it's for free. So
can't beat the price.
Yes.
Yeah, and they're very caring people that do that, and very knowledgeable because of the extra training that they've received. Yeah.
As long as there's not a complex.
Right, and then they also can help refer you to get help elsewhere.
Exactly.
Right. Okay, so speaking of that help elsewhere, if a taxpayer senior needs a professional, how do you select the proper person? How do you do that?
The thing about this business that I'm in is that anybody can say they're a tax pro.
Right.
Or a bookkeeper for that matter. And there's no test or anything else, just to put your name out there and get in the phone book and have a website or whatever.
Right.
And that's, to me, that's part of the reason why I went in to become a CPA, is so that the consumers, the clients know that you have this training and that you're really out to help them.
Right.
And that you really understand the Internal Revenue Code and that you're going to make sure that they pay the least amount of tax as possible. It's a very challenging examination that you have to take, and you have to have a certain amount of continuing education to keep your license.
Sure, because they change every year, and you've got to be up on that.
Right. I think a lot of times people will that really need a tax professional will just go to a franchise tax shop or to a just someone who is not a CPA. And I would say that would be fine as long as they're what's called an enrolled agent. And that's it's not a CPA, but it's a test that the IRS does, that they proctor, and that again it sets a bar that you know that if the person that you go to is an enrolled agent, that they have a professional background
they know
in
something.
it. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And the fees aren't really that much different than what you would pay for a tax franchise place than you would get for an enrolled agent or a CPA firm.
Interesting. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the next question. If somebody is responsible for a deceased friend or relative, personal representative, okay, do they need to file any tax returns for the estate of the person that they're trying to do their best for?
Well, there's usually 2 issues you have to deal with. One is income taxes, and the other one is estate taxes. Estate taxes is completely different than income taxes. But for someone who passes away, the estate we're looking at here, if it's less than $2 million in the state of Washington, that they don't really need to worry about estate taxes, that they can just kind of let that go. If it's approaching that $2 million mark, then you might look at it anyway.
Yeah.
So for the most part, most people, and I've been doing, it used to be $600,000 that you had to file an estate tax return.
Yeah.
But since they raised it, and the federal is over $5 million now, but for the state of Washington, it's $2 million. So most of the clients that I deal with, if they were to pass away, they're probably not even going to have to deal with that issue. But income taxes is another matter. Most of the clients that I run into, at least they have a personal home that has to be sold, and then the heirs would get the money for that. And that transaction has to be reported. And so that would, if the estate was the seller of that home, there would need to be an income tax return filed, even though they didn't meet the limits. You know, that $10,000 limit that we were talking about before, they would still need to file it because they would get this 1099 that said that they just got $150,000 from the sale of this residence, so they need to report that. It's really not that challenging or difficult, and that's what I do a lot of, is that kind of thing.
Right, right.
So they would need to file a final, probably 1040 individual return, and then if the estate was responsible for selling the home, that would be reported on that return.
Yeah.
On it's called a Form 1041, a fiduciary income tax return.
Okay.
And then it's done. Then they're complete.
They're okay.
Yeah.
All right. So say somebody is really at a point where they know they need to talk to somebody. They think it's maybe a little bit more complex than like a regular tax assistant type thing, whether it's through the volunteer assistance program or through a regular packaged group. How would they go about picking an advisor, a CPA, somebody that they knew they could trust? Just because somebody has CPA after their name, can they trust them? How do they?
For the most part, but I think a personal referral, you know, just someone that they know, a friend or relative, is your best resource.
Yeah.
Maybe you have a family attorney or something like that, or just someone that has a business and they already have a relationship with an accountant. They can say, well, they would give get a good recommendation.
Okay.
And in my case, I like to offer a free half hour. Like if somebody isn't really sure whether they need to file or if it's a good fit, that I'll just say, you know, I would like to meet. I meet with them for an hour, and we'll just see if it works out.
It works, yeah.
And if it isn't, I can give you some names of some other people if I'm not the right one.
Okay. Well, thank you. So much good information, and I know we're coming into that time of year where people are kind of thinking, okay, the year's ending and what have you. I need to be getting serious about my reporting and what's going on. So thank you, Gary. And again, thank you for being part of the Senior Action Network. And it's kind of, for me, the good housekeeping seal of approval kind of thing. So I really appreciate your being there for our seniors and that we can count on you.
Thank you, Eileen.
You bet. All right. Well, I hope you have learned as much as I have from Gary here. The good thing is you can press replay if you didn't quite get anything. But really, you can also give a call. And Gary, if somebody could call you, what is your phone number?
Sure, it's 360-786-9515.
Okay, or you can call me at 586-6181. Thank you so much.
In case you hadn't noticed, there's a great energy at work here in the South Sound. It's called SAN, the Senior Action Network. And the name says it all. The collective knowledge, experience, and commitment of dozens of organizations and service providers represents an invaluable resource.